All right, so we're going to jump straight into our main event today. We are blessed to have a Tableau ambassador among us here in Charlotte now. So I wanted to just kick off our meeting by recognizing Rashid for all the hard work he has put in. William and I think we'd both tell you that the smartest thing we've done as co-leads of the Tableau User Group to this point was bring Rashid on. Right, he was recognized as one of Tableau's brand new Tableau User Group ambassadors this year. We could not be prouder. He deserves it for everything he does, from the content he presents to the production quality he has brought to whatever it was that William and I were doing before. Rashid, we sincerely thank you for coming on and joining us and making this whole group better as a result of your efforts. So really want to celebrate you today. Selfishly also for William, now that Rashid's an ambassador, I think we can just sit back and let him present at all of the meetings. It makes our jobs a lot easier. He's got a lot on the line.
Solid plan. That sounds great.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen.
Rashid, congrats. William, I just wanted to give you a chance if there's anything you wanted to add to that. I know you're proud of him as well. It's great to see him honored this way.
You couldn't have said it better. I couldn't say it better than what you said. That was excellent. Both to work on this team with you and to have this community, and to also seeing a lot of familiar names in the chat today. Grateful to have everybody coming back. Keep coming back. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you, Rashid, for all you've done. It's been a wild 6 months of virtual. I think Rashid's efforts in particular have put us in Charlotte in a great place to capitalize on this new TUG environment. The production quality that he's able to add to our virtual sessions has really impressed a lot of folks from other user groups around the world, and that's no exaggeration. So all credit due there. Very, very happy to have Rashid with us. With that, you will get to see more of Rashid today. Don't worry. We're not casting him aside. I'm going to open us up by talking a little bit more about Tableau conference-ish that is going to happen this year. Given the state of the world right now, current events, Tableau has moved their conference virtual. And they've also removed the price tag. So it will be a free, all virtual event over 3 days between October 6th and 8th. I think this is a great opportunity for a lot of folks in this group. In past years, we've seen some folks not be able to go because budget constraints, because company didn't see it as a great investment. But this year, there's no restriction, right? So this year it is October 6th to 8th, all virtual, all for free, all of the things about Tableau Conference that those of us who've been have come to know and love, available to everyone in a much more flexible manner. So very, very excited for this opportunity for folks who haven't been able to go in the past. I think this will be a fantastic opportunity for you to join in on the fun. There's a lot going on. So there's everything from inspirational keynotes to customer sessions highlighting very specific use cases they've deployed. There's the ability to learn. There's training opportunities. And that's a good point, Bill, that you make in the chat. Is it's also not it's not an all-day investment in your time. Most of the days are structured between 12 and 6 p.m. Eastern. You can find ways to shift your schedule around and catch some of this content live. But the ability to, go be inspired by some celebrities that they'll bring in, to connect with people through brain dates, which is the ability to go have, one-on-one chats with folks on various topics, the ability to connect with the Tableau community at large, and also the ability to learn everything from certification on. Couple of quotes from people. Some highlights of the conference. Tableau Doctor, right? You can schedule one-on-ones with Tableau experts to talk through challenges that you're having. You can schedule brain dates that I mentioned, as well as playtime. I don't know exactly what Tableau has in store here. I never do. But I know that in past years at the in-person event, they had everything from like a probably football field sized ball pit, the data pool that people could go like slide down into and do stuff. I can only imagine that they've brought that same creativity to the virtual experience. So playtime, be on the lookout. No idea what they have up their sleeve, but I guarantee it'll be cool. Some of the major events throughout the week. So Iron Viz is a major competition. So it's, if you think back to Iron Chef, so 300 people entered the Iron Viz feeder this year. The top 3 were selected to compete on stage and create a Viz in 20 minutes. That the winner, I believe, will win $10,000 this year. If you can't tell from my Zoom background, I do have a favorite in the competition. Simon Beaumont is a guy that I've met, a couple of times over the years. Really, really like him. He qualified this year. I think the other guys are spectacular, but Simon's my guy. I haven't even seen the visualizations he'll create yet. I know who has my vote. There's a lot of opportunities to explore the Tableau public space through the Viz Gallery, as well as community content. So the finale of the Data Jam or Data Fam Community Jam series will also happen during conference this year. You can go out and build your schedule now. Again, registration's free. Go out and do that. Put your schedule together, see how your day lays out, what you'll be able to catch, what you want to watch on demand. There are 98 broadcasts that will go out live, as well as 217 on-demand recorded sessions that can be watched at any time. A lot of those broadcasts will also be recorded, but they will be streamed live through the conference week. A couple of the featured speakers Tableau is bringing in. Neil deGrasse Tyson is back. I can tell you he was the featured speaker in both 2014 and 2015. Major hit. He went an hour over in 2015 and no one complained. No one wanted to leave the MGM arena. We were totally fine with that. John Legend is actually going to give a performance as well as participate in the fireside chat. Adam Selipsky, Tableau CEO, will obviously open the conference with his vision keynote, and Francois will head up the product keynote that generally leads into devs on stage, aka devs on screen or devs at their desk this year. Sounds as nerdy as it sounds. It's actually a lot of fun. Tableau allows their devs to come up and present the features that they've developed and are looking forward to releasing that mean a lot to them. They're deeply invested in. It's always a lot of fun seeing them be recognized and cheered on for their hard work on a product that they love. Wanted to feature one of our own who's on this call today. John McClelland has the opportunity this year to be featured at TC. His session is going to be on October the 8th at 1:30. John, at the end, I'd love to have you pitch your session if you're interested. I'll kick it to you at the end. But yeah, John, one of our very own will be featured this year. Very excited for John. I know he's been interested in presenting in past years, so very, very happy that he has this chance. And then finally, I put together a quick list of some sessions that I would highly recommend. The first one on this list would be Tableau and Einstein. So obviously with the Salesforce acquisition last year, Tableau and Salesforce have been putting together a roadmap on how to marry up their analytics product. I think this will be a very impactful session on what that vision is, where the integrations are going to come in, and what that future state product will look like. The next session I wanted to highlight is around parameter and set actions. I think that'll be a great way to build on what Rashid is going to tease for you today. I think Rashid will tell you this as well. He's going to cover a lot today, but we could easily do 5-6 sessions on sets, parameters, and all the different types of actions. So he'll give you more content. This session at conference will be another great one. Devs at desks, I already talked about. The session on 10.7 I think will be a good one. It's all about usability for dashboards, which is something I'm really passionate about. So adding context, it's things like we've covered in the past with like adding help overlays, adding additional context so that like the user knows how to use your tool without you standing over their shoulder. And then finally, a conference favorite annually is speed tipping. So this will be a very, very rapid fire. It'll be recorded, no worries. Tableau experts going back and forth teaching little tips and tricks. So based on the survey results earlier, it should be great interest from this crowd. Anyway, and that's it. So you can go out and register today. It's just tableau.com/conference. It'll be advertised on the tableau.com site as well, but tableau.com/conference. Register for free, start building out your schedule, making plans. I'm obviously really bummed that we don't get to do this Tableau conference thing in person this year. It's one of my favorite events. I'm very, very happy that a lot of folks who normally wouldn't get to go have access this year. So look forward to this. Please let me or the team know if you have any questions. We'd be happy to help you navigate the registration process, all of that. Look forward to having you join us at TC. So that's it for me. With that, I'm going to kick it back to this guy. Rashid is going to give us a little presentation on sets. So Rashid, the floor is yours.
All right, thanks, Jeremy. And I want to thank everyone for all the nice things that you guys said. It's just been an honor to work with these guys. I've just been lucky enough to really work with people who have been nice enough to help teach me, to get me up to a speed where apparently they think I know what I'm doing now. So hopefully I can continue to keep that illusion going and, live up to the ambassador role to the best extent that I can. All right, so for those who don't know, I am Rashid Banat. Hey, how you guys doing? I've been with these guys for a little while now. It's probably been over a year. I work at Wells Fargo basically as a Tableau developer and kind of like a compliance officer. And today we're going to talk about controlling your actions. Basically, everything there is about dashboard actions. You can't control your actions until you truly understand the actions themselves. It's probably not just with dashboard actions, probably with life. But let's kind of take a segue because we're going to do something. We're going to have a little fun today. We're going to do more than one thing today. Let me show you what I mean by that. Basically, we are going to talk about dashboard actions, but I am going to practice what I preach. If you don't know, for the past few months, I've been kind of really trying to just verbally communicate how much great content is being produced by so many user groups all over the world. I mean, ever since, the pandemic began, it's kind of been the one little blessing in disguise is that there's been so much content that we all have access to now that we didn't have access to before. And I'm going to show you today how we can leverage each other in ways that I don't know if everybody realizes. Like this is, at some point we will go back to having, meetings locally. And unfortunately, I don't know if we'll be able to continue, to the extent that of what we did virtually. But I hope there'll be a balance. I hope there'll be kind of like a level set between the two. But what I really want to talk about today is I want to show you, basically, I've been talking a lot about this, this best of VTUG. And for those who don't know, to follow us again, all of our content, best way to get to it is always going to be usergroups.tableau.com/Charlotte. Everything that I'm going to show you today, I've actually already loaded to our community page. I'm going to show you some links later on that do with set actions and parameter actions. All of this stuff is on our community page. Our community page is literally just coming here and clicking on community forum. So again, we try to make it so you don't have to remember too many links or bookmark too much stuff. Everything I'm going to show you today in some shape or form you can get to from usergroups.tableau.com/Charlotte. But I really want to talk about is our best of VTUG. And the reason I want to talk about that is because I want to show you that we learn from each other. And I mean, literally me, Jeremy, and William as well. It's not like it's just, us, the tugs that are happening all over the world. I mean, we're really sharing content with each other and learning from each other in ways that are, I hope, benefiting people. We're not the only ones producing great content. We're not the only ones producing great content in North Carolina. Just last week, our friends over at the Raleigh-Durham Tableau User Group, they had a session. I believe they're doing mentoring. I think they're doing a Viz contest. I know they did their session on, kind of what's happening at TC20. And for those who don't know, as what I'm sharing here, Tableau is basically, don't get me wrong, there's the Tableau page, the Tableau virtual community events page. All the future tugs are here, meaning ours and a whole bunch of others. And again, when I say North Carolina, next Tuesday, our friends over at the High Country Tug, I think are going to give a session on new features. So I'm always kind of championing some of these other user groups because I'm going to show you today how powerful what we learn from each other really is. But I say all that to say that you can get to Tableau's YouTube channel, and there's probably 2 or 3 tug meetings a week. I mean, there are so many tug meetings that are happening. It's very, very difficult to keep up with all of them. So what we did is we tried to watch as many of them as we could and kind of highlight the ones that we think you guys would find valuable. That's the whole point of this Best of VTug page. And this Best of VTug page I'm showing you, again, you can just go to usergroups.tableau.com/Charlotte, and it's just Best of VTug. I say all that to say, today I'm gonna live up to my own words. I'm gonna show you that I can put my money where my mouth is, so that if we're gonna talk about dashboard actions today, I'm going to show you my own Makeover Monday of something that another user group did that I just piggyback off of and try to leverage a dashboard that would use every single dashboard action. Back in June, I believe it was the Austin Tableau User Group, and it was Greg Rossi gave a presentation on how to leverage Google Finance, the Google Finance API, and do a live connection from Tableau to a Google Sheet that was tapped into Google Finance, and basically build kind of a live dashboard that had live stock information. I thought that was really cool. I never did that before. I mean, that was impressive to me. So the idea that, this is the dashboard that he actually built. And again, I'm not going to teach you how to do this because I'm going to encourage you to watch this video because that's how I learned how to do it. But fundamentally, what he did was he basically just built a sheet, a Google sheet. And in that sheet, all he had was a company name and a ticker symbol. That's it. That's all he loaded. Google Finance did the rest. It populated all the stock information. It populated the history, did everything for him. And this was being kind of updated, not on a real time, I think on a 1-day delay. But this was all through Tableau Public. And again, I didn't know you could do that. So I did a Makeover Monday. And for those who don't know what Makeover Monday is, that's kind of you take a dashboard and you just try to enhance it, try to make it better. It's a great way to learn Tableau. Just do a Google search on Makeover Monday or Workout Wednesday. Those are both great ways to develop your Tableau skill set. But again, I looked at this as an opportunity to say, I kind of wanted to learn how he did this, and I want to see if I can enhance it with dashboard actions. So this is the dashboard that Greg Rossi built, and this is kind of what I did. I took his concept and try to extend it, if you will, to see if there was a way I can make it better with dashboard actions. This dashboard I'm showing you uses all 5 dashboard actions. It uses set actions, it uses parameter actions, it uses highlight, filter, and URL actions. And again, for those who don't know, the action is really the interactivity. If you look, it just looks kind of like some stock information that's branded around Amazon. But the beauty is when we start clicking around, if I were to now choose FedEx, you're going to see that basically, well, let's try that again. Hopefully it loads up. If I were to choose FedEx, that the whole thing rebrands in a way that makes it look like it's from FedEx. Same thing with all these other companies. If I choose Facebook, it looks like it's branded from Facebook. If I were to choose, let's say, Google, it looks like it's branded from Google. Now, if you notice, that's just one aspect, and that was actually done with parameter actions. But his dashboard allows you to compare one company against the others. So, I mean, looks like I didn't include that, but I kind of did. If we're focused on Amazon and I also choose Google at the same time, we can now get a comparison of both Amazon and Google at the same time. This is an example of set actions, and we're going to talk about all of this, but I just want to show you that this is a use case where I just piggyback off of somebody else, meaning that, it was Greg Rossi's dashboard that inspired me to kind of do this to show you. So that's what I mean, that it's important, I'll get off my soapbox, but it's important to also participate in the other user groups as well, because they're producing really, really great stuff that even myself and a few others are learning from and then incorporating in our presentations. So this was my example of how I use dashboard actions in this particular dashboard. And I'll show you this particular dashboard and how it was done. But let's take a step back to really talk about dashboard actions in general, because I feel like you have to understand the basics before you can kind of get to something like this. So What is a dashboard action? If you go to Tableau, they'll tell you dashboard action is an interactive element on Tableau dashboard that's driven from the worksheets within that dashboard. Users can interact with the visualizations, selecting marks, hovering, clicking on the menu, and the action can respond with navigation and changes in the view. So what does all of that mean? Basically, the best way to describe dashboard actions is to actually start looking at them and seeing exactly how they work. Because a dashboard action is just that. It's meant to be a way to interact with the dashboard, meaning that it only really adds value when the user starts clicking or hovering or, choosing things within a menu. And each action has a purpose, kind of like, really where it's meant to be used and kind of where it shines, I would say. So the most basic action is the filter action. Oh, if you have any questions, I'm sorry, feel free to put them in the chat. William or Jeremy, definitely, stop me if need be. And if you want me to kind of go over something again, or hopefully they might be able to answer it themselves. But a filter action at its core is quite simple. So first, let me explain what a filter action is, and then we'll kind of go through the actual action menu itself, and we'll go through kind of all of the different settings and kind of exactly what each one means. But a filter action at its core is really just a way to basically, use the data from one view to filter data in another view. So I have this little data. This is all Superstore, sample Superstore data. This entire workbook is also already on the community forum, so don't worry about, whether you'll have access to this stuff, but it's all there. You'll be able to kind of look at all the stuff that I'm sharing right now. So again, this is an example of a really basic type of action where I've got 3 sheets. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to basically, and it's already set up, but I'll show you basically how this one works, where I have just one filter action, and that action is basically going to filter it's going to let me choose something in sales by region, which is this bar chart at the top. And when I choose something, it's going to filter these 2 tables beneath it, these 2 views underneath it, based upon my selection up here. And if you want to see exactly, this is basic, but it's important to understand kind of how these things work. So if I were to choose the West, you'll see that basically some of the numbers start to change. If I choose the South, basically the bottom 2 visualizations are now filtered on my selection. It's kind of the basics of a filter action and kind of how it works. What I want to talk about is kind of basically some of the settings in here so that you understand basically how they work as well. Now, I will tell you just from experience, something as simple as the name, it gets overlooked. When you really start getting into actions, I can't stress this enough, be very, very specific with how you name your actions. It's not that uncommon to have a dashboard that might have 10 to 15 to 20 actions. And even if you know what each action does, help the next developer or person that comes behind you and may have to work on your dashboard so that they understand what each action does. Because this is a bad example. Like it just says filter action. I should have been way more descriptive in the name to describe that this filter action is filtering this particular sheet, and I should have named the sheet and exposed the name. And so it's clear exactly what this action is meant to do, because it could be a scenario where I have multiple filter actions on one dashboard. So it's a good case to always, like I said, name your actions, no matter what the filter URL, no matter what. The next thing is basically your source sheets. And this is important because this is going to apply to some of the other actions as well. It's important to remember that in this example, I filtered basically 2 views on the bottom based upon a selection on the top, but everything happened on the same dashboard. You don't have to stay within the same dashboard. You can have an action that literally filters or basically applies to another sheet or maybe even another dashboard. I can choose something here and it could affect the tab down here or something of that nature. You are allowed to basically have one source and it could be the same target, but it could also be a different target. So just so you know, everything here is happening in the dashboard that's called filter actions, and you can see the name down there. But it is possible to have your source and your target be different. They don't have to necessarily be one and the same. You can have an action that applies somewhere else per se. The run action on, this is important, and we'll do this here because I don't want to have to repeat. It's the same principle for the other actions as well. But to make sure you understand, you basically have 3 choices when it comes to how you want the action to run. You can have an action run off a hover, a select, or a menu. And the best way to describe that is just to show you. Right now it's on a select, which would mean that if I actually click on a value, that's how the action will get run, meaning you have to click something for it to run. It's kind of self-explanatory. So a hover is obviously going to be, if I just hover over something, then the action will run. And I'll show you what the menu one looks like as well. So if I change this and we say hover, hover. Now, as I start hovering over stuff, you'll see things are changing. And a menu action, and a menu action is actually very valuable, and you will use those as well. But that's even more of a scenario where you really want to concentrate on the name, because when you choose a menu action, your name is basically what's going to be exposed, meaning that if I were to make this a menu action, it now would make sense to do something like this, where I say, click here to filter, or something of that nature. And the reason that's going to happen is because now I'll click OK, and I'll choose something. But now when I choose something, you see that's basically a menu action, meaning the name of the action is what's going to be exposed in the tooltip as kind of like a hyperlink. And really, when you click on it, it's just going to basically conduct that filter. And that's going to be applying whether it's URL, filter, highlight, that premise of basically, forget how they describe it, the run action on this. It's the same throughout. So you really only have those three choices. It's important to also understand the run on single select query. I'm going to change this back to select, and then I'm going to choose run on single select query, and I'll say okay. And basically that does what it implies, meaning that it's still the same principle. If I click on one particular, choice, it'll filter, but I don't have the ability to click on more than one, meaning you can hold down like the control key and make more than one selection. But because I put that checkbox on run on single select, it's not going to be filtering on both of these. Now, if I take that checkbox off, it will. So you can control that if you ever want to create a dashboard where maybe you only want your users to choose one thing at a time. You don't want them to choose more than one. So now that I've taken the check off, I can choose one thing or I can choose more than one. And you'll see as I'm choosing more than one, it is actually incorporating my choices in those selections. And really, at the end of the day, I think there's one more thing with filter actions that we can talk about at the bottom, but filter actions you will use probably the most. I'm sorry, yeah, clearing the selection will. Because again, this is a pretty straightforward action where I'm just clicking on my chart up top, which is sales by region, and it's filtering the two views at the bottom. It's targeting all fields. You can select fields intentionally. Maybe you don't want it to target all fields. Maybe you just want it to just target like an ID number or dates or something like that. So you have that choice. But the clearing the selection will, it's important because there are times where you will strategically use this as well. And I'm going to show you in my other dashboard that I had to do just that. I had to strategically kind of choose which one of these I wanted, because I wanted things to happen so that my users could do certain things, but only those things. I didn't want them to do anything more. But clearing the selection will is basically indicating what do you want Tableau to do when someone deselects their choice. Right now it's on show all values. So right now I'm selecting the West, but if I deselect it, if I click again, and now everything, it'll just go back to basically showing all values. And there's a use case for that, but there's also a use case for some of those other choices as well. So if I were to change this to, let's say, exclude all values, you'll see what's going to happen. Meaning now when I choose something, it'll filter on my choice. And if I choose it again, everything just disappears. And there's a good use case for this because there are times where, I don't want to get into tiled versus layout containers and stuff like that, but if you are using tiled, you can really maximize your real estate, meaning that there's a way to do this in tiled where if these go blank, the bar chart can now take up the entire space. The bar chart can take up the entire view, but when they click on something, then these things will just magically appear. And like I said, so on and so forth. Because if I were to click something again, it'll come back. And if I were to, release it, it'll just disappear. So like I said, there are use cases as to when and why you'd want to use these types of things. And the last one is basically just leave the filter as is. And again, you'd be surprised. This is another example where even I used this today on my other dashboard, where this is just a concept of you make a selection. Basically, when you release it, it's going to just stay on that selection. So it was filtered on the east. If I filter on south, it'll change to the values for the south. And if I release it, it just stays the same, meaning it's staying on your most recent selection. It'll just kind of keep that until someone makes a change, basically, within their selection, I guess you could say. At its core, that is the basics, not just around filter actions, but around a lot of the controls. I'm going to show you highlight and URL next, and those are pretty straightforward and simple as well. And then we'll get into the meat of this, which is parameter actions and set actions. And those, there's so many different ways you can use them. I'll show you how I used them. I'll show you some links to some articles of how other people use them. They are truly the ones that open the gambit for creativity. When you start to get into set actions and parameter actions, there's almost no limit to what you can do. So let me kind of just show you the rest of filter, URL, and highlight. And then, like I said, we'll get into the meat of the ones that I think are the most powerful and let you do a wide variety of stuff. But at its core, a filter action is kind of what I described, which is the way to basically filter, not just things in your existing current view, but also perhaps in other views as well, based upon a user selection or a user input. And it's a soapbox kind of conversation, but I always say, to say it at its simplest form, if you have a choice between using filter actions or using actual quick filters, try to use filter actions. Filter actions are better. They're just better for performance. I can just leave it at that. I can spend an hour talking about this, but from a performance perspective, if you have the ability to let someone filter on something by, like I said, the action itself, as opposed to using the quick filter, go with the action. Tableau will appreciate it. Your performance will appreciate it. Now, your business user may want quick filters. If your business user wants quick filters, give your business users what they want. But try to sell them the idea on filter actions, because filter actions truly do, they're optimized and they perform better than quick filters. You're not going to win this battle every time. You will have to use quick filters and you'll have to give them to your business partners. But like I said, some battles you'll win, some battles you'll lose. But it is, in my opinion, better. Filter actions actually do perform better than quick filters, and like I said, it's a use case scenario. There's always going to be use cases where one does actually provide more value than the other. Okay, if you have any questions on filter actions, put them in the chat or the QA. Like I said, if Jeremy, William, if I need to stop, let me know. But if not, I'll kind of keep going. Because like I said, highlight and URL are kind of straightforward and follow the same premise as well. If a filter action lets you click on something and basically then, filter other views, whether they're on the same dashboard or a different dashboard, what a highlight action does, it basically kind of does, the same thing, but instead of filtering, it lets you highlight basically what was selected. And again, this is me personally. I would say that I think highlight actions are best used in things like what I'm showing here, like scatter plots and line charts, because as you can see, there's a lot going on here and it looks kind of ugly and just crazy. But as I start to hover over different customers, you're going to see that there's a legitimate use case. This is probably not the best example, but that's what I mean, that there is a legitimate use case for a highlight action, meaning that there are times where it does make sense. And again, like I said, we can look at the actual card itself, but it's a lot of the same choices that we had with the filter action. As you can see, it's really not that much different. We have the name, which again should be very specific as to what it's doing. We have our source sheet, which is basically what your source sheet is basically saying when the user does the hover, what do you want us to, which sheet should it apply to? So right now, my hover is applied to everything. So no matter where you hover, it's actually going to highlight, basically whatever is selected down here. And again, I have it on selected fields and just customer names. But what that means is, where before on my filter actions, you had to click something here to have something happen down here. But on the highlight action, it doesn't really matter where you hover. You can hover on any of these sheets and they all basically have the same type of behavior, where no matter what I'm hovering on, as you can see, basically every source sheet is also a target sheet. So that's kind of a little way to try to understand the difference between the source and the target. And this is what I mean by the use case. It really depends on what you want to provide to your customers. Do you want them to be able to hover over anything and get that same kind of interaction? Or maybe you only want that to work with just customer ranking. Maybe I don't want them to be able to do it anywhere else. So like I said, there's not like a universal approach. I think it's you need to talk to your business partners, understand what they need and kind of what would work best for them. And then, like I said, you're going to kind of come up with use cases of what makes sense where. Maybe it's not a hover. Maybe it should be something that they have to select. Maybe it should be a menu action. Maybe it should be, like I said, only let it work on just customer rank, not on the other one. So now, if I were to do this, now same principle, when I hover over something in customer ranking, it's working, but hovering anywhere else does nothing. So like I said, this is an example of a highlight action. And like I said, these are always going to be use case scenarios. I would always try to think of it that way. You want to kind of make these things work for your business partner or your user, meaning it should make the dashboard better or more intuitive, or just basically help kind of accentuate the story, or really make that the whole thing easier to kind of comprehend and understand. In a nutshell, I'm not going to spend any more time on highlight actions because, like I said, I think they're pretty straightforward. But any questions, anything like that with highlight actions, feel free to put them in the chat or the QA, and then we'll just move on to URL actions. Now, URL actions are powerful. But again, a lot of this is going to be the context of how you use them. So what I want to just show you basically here is just an example of a URL action. The best way to describe this is just to show you. Really what we have here, we have some dashboard information. We have a map. We kind of have an area chart down here, and we actually have a web page. Like that literally is the web page object. And right now it's actually looking at a Wikipedia page, and it looks like it's filtered on California. This is going to show you if I start choosing different states, what you should see happen, but it is not happening for some reason. Let's try that again. Oh, that's a good point. Let's look at our action. So we might not have a working dashboard action. Let's see here. Interesting. Well, let's do this in a new browser tab because even I am unsure right now of why that's not working. So as you can see,
You
when
named
I
it,
click,
Rashid.
what happened?
It's a good thing you named those actions.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good use case, but I'd like to see why that didn't work. Well, let's take a step back and let's see what happened and kind of why it happened. So basically what had happened here is that I have a web page kind of embedded in the dashboard itself. And what was supposed to happen is when I choose a different state, the web page, the Wikipedia page should have switched to that state. And let's look at the action and maybe we can solve this kind of, on the fly. But let's talk about the action and kind of how that works. A URL action, as it says here, allows you to create a hyperlink to an external resource, such as a web page, a file, or another Tableau worksheet. The reason this is valuable is basically in a nutshell, I think a URL action allows you to do just this. You can take a URL and basically swap out a piece of it or multiple pieces of the URL and swap in something from your data set. So the best way to describe this is let's look at that URL in like Chrome. So let me click on something else again. Let's click on Oregon. Okay. As you can see, this is a scenario where you kind of have to know the URLs that you have to find a legitimate use case, because what you're looking for is a URL where a part of the URL is something that you have in your data set. Like in our sample Superstore data set, we do have state names. And if this is something as simple as just swapping out the name, in the URL for just any old state, if it works, then that's a use case. Like I just typed in Florida and that seemed to work. So I can now say that this might be a good case for a dashboard URL action, because a URL action is literally going to do just that. A URL action is going to allow me to insert basically, and I'll use this as the example. We'll go back. What you want to do in these types of scenarios is you want to basically choose the part of the URL that does not change, meaning everything I selected is going to stay the same, but I didn't select that last piece, which is Florida, because that is going to change. So I'm going to put this in here, and then I'm going to insert a field from my data set, and I'm going to insert state. And mind you, you can insert multiple fields. You can have really sophisticated URLs where maybe it puts state in this part, and then it has some more, code or some more to the URL, and then I put like, another field from my data set in there. And like I said, as long as the link itself would work, if the real value was written there, then this will work as well. So what this is doing, it's saying, for this particular action, which is a URL action, what I want you to do is I want you to take a source sheet, and in my case, it's going to be the map, the sales map that you kind of see back there. And when someone selects something on the sales map, I want you to take that value and insert it at this point in the URL. So what it did, it said every time I switch, every time I click on a different state, whatever that state name is, it's going to insert it at this point in the URL, and then it could either open it up in a new browser, or what it was supposed to do was open it up in the same browser of my dashboard. So let's see if I can hope that this for some reason will now work. I'm going to say okay. I'll say okay, and we'll try one more time. We'll try the state of Georgia. And no, it doesn't seem to want to be working today. This normally does work, and I'm sure as heck, there's the opportunity for us to help each other. If anyone knows why this is not working for me, feel free to put it in the chat. But as you can see, the URL action is working when I don't do it, when I open up a new window. Basically, if I do a new browser tab, it'll work the way I want it to. I will choose like Nevada or something like that. So it is working. For some reason, it's just not working with my web page object. And if I had some time, I could probably research this. It's probably something I did here with this actual web page object for whatever reason why it's not working. But yeah, that's interesting. All right, I'm not going to dwell on it, but that's basically how a URL action works. It allows you to have that ability to take data from your data set, feed it into a URL. And again, that URL doesn't necessarily have to be a web page. You know, you could have like a spreadsheet or something that might be stored online somewhere. If you ever look, sometimes hyperlinks are really, really, really long, you know, and they might be a hyperlink that opens up a Word document or something like that. So it's the same principle. You know, as long as it's a hyperlink, you can change what's in the hyperlink depending upon what a user selects in your dashboard. And then you can have that behavior kind of open up a working version of something in a separate browser, or hopefully, you know, in the same Tableau dashboard. This might be one of these things that works, you know, like when it's published, but just doesn't seem to work on desktop. But I'll figure this out. Maybe I'll put something in the community forum of why it didn't work and kind of how to get past that, you know, if you ever stumble upon that in the future. Okay, so that's kind of the basics of filter actions, highlight actions, and URL actions. So now we get to move on to the major ones, I like to call them. Set actions and parameter actions. Set actions. Now, set actions, to me, it's not just valuable, but it's one of those things that you really can't talk about set actions without really talking about sets. You really need to understand how sets work and the value of sets before you get into the concept of the set action. So what I have here is kind of some information to just kind of walk through basically what a set action does, and then we'll talk about kind of the concept of it, and then I'll show you, you know, kind of a use case scenario, and even the one I used in my dashboard. So what is a set action? You know, set actions basically, I think the way to describe them, you know, and that's kind of why I included this visualization as kind of a way to understand, is that a set action allows you to or I should say allows your user to make a selection, and that selection defines what's in or out of the set. So what does that mean? The best way I think that I found this particular visualization here, I really felt like this kind of hits the nail on the head, and I'll show you what I mean. A filter, when you think about it, and even a filter action, it's not different than the concept of a set. It's just a filter is only going to include what's in the set, basically saying that when you filter on values 1, 2, and 3, you have now defined 1, 2, and 3 as being the only things that you want to see. And if you were talking in terms of a set, you basically defined what was in the set. But a set allows you to have this concept of things that are outside of the set, not just what's inside of the set. I'll show you an example of kind of what I mean and how this works. On the left side is just what I'm going to call just a filter type of scenario where the left side is just filters and the right side kind of uses this concept of sets, and it's the same information. It's just subcategory and sales on subcategory, and here we have, you know, those sales kind of over time. The concept of a filter is pretty straightforward. If I were to start changing things in this, and I say if I only want to select maybe 1, 2, and 3, just appliances, art, and accessories, I have defined now this particular sheet to only show values that have these subcategories. It's filtered on just these 3 subcategories. If I had to do the same thing over here with the concept of a set, I want you to see the difference. It's not that it's any different, but what's happening here is the set is basically saying, oh, okay, you want to keep accessories, appliances, and art, but you don't want to keep everything else. So the blue line here is the same as this blue line, but here you get to see the concept of the things that are outside of the set. And that's really where the value of sets come into play, because you can't use anything that isn't selected when you start talking about filters. You really can't, unless you start talking about, you know, LODs and fixed expressions and things of that nature. When you do a filter, what you select or what your user select is really all that's going to show, and it's kind of all they have to work with. But when you take the concept of a set, even though they've selected something, you could still show them the things they didn't select. You can still keep that concept of things that are outside of the set in your views and in your kind of your visualizations, and use them in a way that may or may not be beneficial. And a set action, the best way to describe a set action is that what you're seeing here basically is actually now referred to as a set control. But, you know, and this is something that I think in 20.0 2 or 3 that you could expose and let your users just, I think the idea would be saying, what if I don't want my users to actually have to choose something like this? What if I just want them to be able to choose something like we were doing before, like where they just click on a value and that defines what is shown and what isn't. And that is at its core a set action. Like if we look at this set action here, what it's doing is basically on the right, mind you, everything that we talk about with sets is going to be on this right view, not the left. But what it's doing, it's saying for the, the set action that's called set action. And again, don't practice what I preach. Write better descriptive names, for all of your actions, because I'm a bad example of this. But for set actions, what this is doing, it's saying the source sheet is just set table, and that's this table that's right here. And it's saying when a user selects something from this table, what I want you to do is I want you to, for the my data source, which is just a sample superstore, running the action will assign values to the set. So as someone selects something in this set table, that's what defines what's in the set. And clearing the selection will add all of the values basically to the set. So basically watch what happens. If I just leave this as is and I just say okay, and then I say okay, now same scenario as before. I'm going to click appliances. I'm going to click, all right, and I'm just holding the control key. So I'm basically choosing a few things, but it's the same concept of as if this was like a nice bar chart or something like that. I selected these 3 values. These 3 values are in the set. Everything else is not. If I deselect this, if I just kind of take everything off, now everything is in the set. And my user can control what is in and out of the set based upon their selections. So as someone starts choosing stuff, it's defining what is in and out of the set. This is basically the core of how a set action works. You're allowing your user to define what is in the set and what's out of the set. It's like a true-false statement. At the end of the day, there's really only, is it in the set or is it not in the set? But how you use that information has limitless possibilities with creativity. Because again, you could start writing calculations, you could start writing custom, you could do so much on this concept of whether something is in or out of the set that I'll show you one example and then I'll show you some links for like 22 other examples. When it's all said and done, there might be thousands of examples. I encourage you. Jeremy talked about it as well earlier. At conference this year, set it up. When do you set versus parameter actions? Anytime you can get any information on set or parameter actions, trust me, there's so many possibilities. Even when you understand how they work, there's still multitudes of ways to use them. And that's what I mean, that it's more than just understanding how they work. You get to see people's creativity and how they take it to like levels, and you're like, oh wow, I didn't even think about doing something like that. But at its core, that is what a set action is, and that's kind of how it works. And it's important to understand, like I said, the concept of the set and how that works, and then the set action and then how it works before you really get into the concept of really starting to apply all of this. I've got 5 or 6 different links here. There's some really good articles. Again, these links are, the workbook itself is available, like I said, on our community forum page. But even if you don't want to download the entire workbook from today, which is this, all of these links, for use cases for set actions and parameter actions, again, I can't encourage you enough. These are going to be way better than kind of what I'm showing you today. What I'm showing you today is like an introductory type of a thing. They're going to get into some really good use cases. And even what you see here is a pretty good use case where what's happening is a user is selecting countries basically on this map. And as they make the selections, what they select is either in the set or out of the set. Based upon what I'm looking at here, it looks like the selection is what's the dark blue, and it looks like what's in the set is dark blue, what's out of the set is gray. So like I said, these are good examples of how you could use the set action to kind of define what's in your view. And like I said, when you start thinking of creativity, there's really endless possibilities of kind of how you can use set actions. So I know I don't want to spend too much time. I want to talk about parameter actions real quick. And then I'm going to show you, like I said, the dashboard that I built and just show you real quick how that worked, how I was able to incorporate all 5 of these things in that dashboard. So if that was set actions, and again, any questions, anything like that, put them in the chat, the QA. Jeremy Williams, stop me if you need to. But for parameter actions are going to be a little bit simpler to explain, in that where a set action is this concept of allowing a user to select one or more things. Like in this example, a user selecting like multiple countries, and you really have this concept of selecting either one thing or more than one thing and defining whether it's in or out of the set. Parameter action kind of says the other way. It's kind of the other way around. Parameter action says you could select one thing. You can select, I can only pass one thing to a parameter. But the beauty of a parameter action, A set action is limited to values in your data set. The concept of the set itself. Remember, even in my scenario, subcategory is a field in my data set. I'm just letting a user define whether their choices are in or out of the set, but it's a field in my data set. A parameter action opens up the gambit. It doesn't have to be a field in your data set. I'll do you one better. It doesn't even have to come from the same data source. You could have a scenario where a user clicks on something. And in this example, if you click on, basically, it's not even a click. If you hover, this is a parameter action. As I hover over a value, it's changing the value of the parameter. So as you can see, whatever you do in this table affects basically what's stored in this parameter. And this is why parameter actions are extremely powerful. This is, let's say, coming from sample superstore data. Let's say I had another sheet over here coming from a different data source, completely unrelated to superstore, no joins, no relationships, completely separate. You could have the same thing where they can hover here and it passes a value to the parameter, or they hover here and it passes a value to the parameter. It can be used across multiple data sources. And when, again, this goes back to that concept of creativity, where when you start thinking about that, it really opens up the gambit of kind of how you can start to use these things. So what a parameter action really does at its core, it lets you let a user define the value stored in the parameter. Now, once that value is in the parameter, it's no different than any other parameter. You can use it to the extent of your own creativity. It's a parameter. It's a value in a parameter, the way you use a value in a parameter today. It's just its selection is not defined by a user's choice somewhere else, perhaps in your dashboard. So I'm going to kind of piggyback this off to show you my dashboard and kind of how, because I want to show you that this dashboard that I built literally has 5 actions. I just used each one of those 5 actions in a way that I thought would be beneficial for this particular use case, if you will. So we'll kind of go through them one by one. But I want to start with the parameter action here, because this was the one that actually offered the most value, because what you cannot do in Tableau is dynamic background image swapping. Like, that's not a thing. I think I just made that up. I don't know if it's a official term or something like that. So the concept of being able to select something in the view, it's the header and the footer. If you look closely, it's not just the header that's changing. Both the top and the bottom are changing. But the ability to do that, all parameter actions. That's literally exactly what's happening here. And I'll show you how that works. It's pretty straightforward in the parameter action itself, but again, it's like I said, a lot of this is how you use it. What this parameter action is doing, and like I said, this is where I started to get better with my naming, so that I knew that this parameter action is tied to the logos. So I know that basically it's only focused on my logo sheet, and that's basically what you see up here. And if someone selects a logo, what it's doing, it's taking the selection, the value that's stored for that selection, and it's passing it to the parameter called company parameter. And basically it'll keep the current value after that. So again, easiest way to describe something like this is to show you, is to just start exposing things so that you kind of see exactly how they're working. So this is the thing that you're not seeing behind the scenes, but in this case, I'll show you. As I start switching logos, that's what's happening. It's the company name is being passed to that parameter. And that parameter is how I'm able to now define what's happening in the background. That's what I mean, that the parameter action itself isn't really doing all that much. It's just letting me let the user define kind of what's being stored in the parameter at any point in time. Now, the trick to making the background image swapping, if you're curious about that, that is a scenario where I actually had to start getting into some of the background image mapping, meaning in the mapping capabilities in Tableau. All that's happening here is I have a glorified kind of this x-axis and y-axis. I want to show you that those values aren't actually doing anything. They're like placeholders. The x-axis is the value 1, same with the y-axis. It's literally just the value 1. So that's all that those 2 things are doing. I don't want you to think there's some sophisticated calculation or something. So now that you understand that, I've got these 6 or 7 different background images, which is each one of those background images, literally. But what's happening is if you open these things up, it's kind of like there's an axis. You're just not seeing it. It's hidden. So I think as I start showing stuff, maybe it'll start to make sense. Now that I'm showing you the axis, remember how those values were just 1? It's just a fixed axis between 0 and 1 on both the X and the Y axis, hence why the picture fits perfectly. Now, again, like I said, there's a lot of moving parts so that you can kind of see the whole thing come together. So now that I can kind of put a picture as a background image wherever I want it to be, how do I swap it out for another one? Meaning that when they make a selection, how do I switch it from the Google background image to the Amazon background image? And the way to do that is literally you can have these background images have filters, meaning that this is only going to show when the company filter equals Amazon. So there's the company filter. Well, what does the company filter actually do? Well, let's take a look at it. Let's find company filter, and I'll show you if I can find company filter. Where is company filter? Where are you, company filter? And I'm just going to have to search for it. There it is. Okay. Company filter is my company parameter. So it's it's kind of like Inception. You got to kind of stay with me. The logo that I choose basically defines what gets assigned to the company parameter. The company parameter is the basis of the company filter. The company filter is what drives what's showing in the image map at any given time. If I were to start swapping this here without actually doing the logos, but just swapping the actual, you'll see it's the same. The parameter action is just allowing me to do this with the logos. It would have worked, but I would have had to expose this parameter and let someone kind of choose based on the parameter selection as opposed to the logo itself. So this is kind of showing you just my, like I said, there are so many different creative ways to do stuff like this. This is how I incorporated a parameter action into this particular dashboard so I can create basically dynamic background image swapping. So that was the example of the parameter action. I want to show you the set action because that was another example where it was a use case scenario. As you can see, you can choose a company, but you can also choose more than one company. Let's compare Apple and Microsoft. Now, if I hold down the control key and I select both of these, now you've got the line chart that shows basically the performance of both of these companies over the last 6 months. And it's just, good information. You could see how the coronavirus affected both of them. You can kind of see who's recovering and kind of when and how. You can kind of see that they kind of following the same path almost. It looks like Microsoft took a bigger dip than perhaps maybe Apple did during the coronavirus. But, it's useful information to be able to kind of compare these companies to each other. But again, the set action that's happening here, and I'll show it to you, that's actually what you're seeing in that line chart. Because again, it's the same principle that we described before. As you can see, it says set action table and line chart. Good example of why you need to have descriptions in your names, because even I didn't realize it was on the table as well. Thought it was just a line chart. So if we open that up, what's happening here is that basically same as before, when someone selects a company logo, what's happening is it's going to pass that selection into the set that's called company set. And basically whatever they pick gets assigned to the set. And when they clear the selection, it keeps the set values. Remember, this is, like I said, use cases. Why do I want to keep the set values when they clear the selection? Well, in this scenario, I have a good reason to, because when someone chooses Apple, I kind of want it to basically, stay on Apple. But what if they don't choose anything at all? What if I take it off of Apple? Well, I don't want it to go anywhere. You see what I'm saying? I don't want all of those lines to show at the same time. That was me strategically, because I kind of wanted to color coordinate the lines, and it just got a little busy. I wanted to make sure whether they selected something or didn't select something, that everything stayed as is until they made a new selection. So that's the example of the set action and kind of why, I wanted to keep the behavior of basically clearing out the action won't necessarily change the view, meaning that it'll still keep all the set values. But the important reason of the set action itself, especially for the line chart, was again the concept of being able to compare one thing to another. Because when I choose Apple and I choose Facebook, what you're seeing in this line chart are two values that are in the set, and everything not in the set is hidden. So again, it's only going to show you things that are in the set. If I were to choose, Microsoft at the same time, that's probably gets a little ugly, but you're seeing it's that same principle. This line chart is set up in a way where it's only going to show values in the set, so that my users can define what's in the set by what they select up here. But at the same time, I know that any given time that they're only ever going to see line charts for what they select. There's no way to see every single line chart unless they selected every single logo. That was my strategic choice in making sure that this set action did what I wanted it to do. I couldn't do this any other way, I don't think, outside of set actions. And the rest are pretty straightforward. The filter action is pretty straightforward because, again, and just so you understand the high level concept of this dashboard, again, the only thing I loaded into this data set was a name, a ticker symbol, and unlike Greg, I actually loaded a description. So my data set had 3 pieces of information. Google Finance did the rest. I'm not loading any of these stock prices, any of this history. All of that's happening from Google Finance, and it's doing it, like I said, on I think a 1-day delay. All I loaded was the name and the ticker and the description. So my filter action was a pretty straightforward scenario where I only want to show one description at a time, meaning that I want this to only show what's basically, being selected. Because otherwise, what would happen is that when someone doesn't select anything, you'd have all these descriptions in this little, box here, either squeezed in or there'd be a scroll bar. So my filter action is basically doing something pretty simple and straightforward, which is just saying when someone chooses a company logo, and you see how, again, I use the logos virtually for everything. When they choose a company logo, the company description, it'll be filtered on just the company description. But when they clear the selection, it leaves the filter. So it's always going to only show one description at a time. How do I know it's only going to show one description at a time? Because it's literally set up to run on a single select only. Again, like I said, always remember use cases. This is a scenario where I don't want my users to ever see more than one selection. The whole point is that they only get to see one selection at a time. So this is a filter action that made sense for me to be able to just show basically what's applicable to each company that's selected. And yes, if you select more than one company, you still only get to see one description. So even though I can choose Amazon and Google at the same time, these added 2 sets of values, but the description is still on Amazon. The branding still on Amazon. It's always going to take kind of that initial selection. I could have done the inverse where I just basically select Google first and then choose Amazon after. And now it's the same thing, just in reverse, where I selected Google first. So it's branded like Google. Google's information's here. But again, it only allows the background and the description to show basically what the first selection was. So we've covered parameter actions, set actions, filter actions. Now let's talk about the remaining 2, which are the highlight action and the URL action. The highlight action, again, is pretty straightforward and simple. This was not a good dashboard for a highlight action because, like I said, I feel personally that highlight actions really have their value when you have like a scatter plot or a line chart or something like that, where you have a lot, it's busy, like your visual is really, really busy. And when they do something, now that becomes clear in the business, kind of what that particular value or values should, kind of what they were. But in this scenario, my highlight action, when someone selects a logo, all it's doing on this valuation details, and that's this table on the bottom left, it's basically just highlighting basically what was selected. So it's kind of like saying, in addition to having this here highlighted, and this is not a highlight action, this is actually something I'm doing kind of with the color marks card on this particular sheet. But as you start switching companies, you can see that that's happening with the color marks card on the sheet, but the yellow that you see here is actually the highlight action. So that's all that's happening with the highlight action. So again, as you select more than one thing, you're seeing that this is what the highlight action is doing. It's highlighting the name in yellow, it's kind of highlighting the values, and it's kind of graying out everything else. So that basically, as I make selections, everything else kind of is grayed out. And it's also basically only exposing the label for basically what is highlighted as well. And there's some stuff that's happening so that it's always kind of showing you the right suffix, where, the market cap for Facebook is 710 billion, yet Amazon is, darn near 1.5 trillion. And that's other stuff that has nothing to do with actions. But like I said, the highlight action is pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Not the best dashboard to do something like this on. And the URL action is literally as easy as what you think it is, and literally does exactly what you think it does, which is it's just in that URL description. Another example where you can see we've got a pretty long URL in there, but what's happening is on the URL description from the market trend dashboard, from company description, which is basically this sheet here, when you click on it, this is basically going to take you to this Google URL. And if you look closely, it's just a ticker. That's the only thing that's literally coming from my data set. Everything else about this URL is literally what it would have been, from Google itself. And what that allows me to do, even though this says click here to learn more, this is a glorified lie, because it didn't matter if you clicked here, you click anywhere in this box. The whole sheet itself will take you to basically Google Finance. If I click on it, it should open up a new, basically you're just looking at Google Finance filtered on that particular ticker. So as we start switching stuff around, same concept as before, we can switch this to Apple. And if we click anywhere, it's just going to open it up pre-filtered on Apple. Okay, so we're a little bit past 1 o'clock. I've been talking for quite some time. But at its core, that's kind of what I would say is the fundamentals of the 5 actions themselves. Real quick, I am ignoring an action. There is one more that's here that I did not cover. Filter, highlight, go to URL. This is basically a URL action. Parameter, set action. Go to sheet. Go to sheet is the one did not acknowledge. It is a legitimate action. I have nothing against it. I do feel like when navigation buttons became a thing, and they did become a thing, I don't know which version it was, I haven't found too many more use cases for Go to Sheet anymore. I'm curious to know your thoughts. I used to use Go to Sheet as a glorified way of navigating so that someone could click on this sheet and then just automatically go to another sheet, like a drill-in. Like if this was, the sheet for Amazon, I had more details about Amazon on another sheet, they would click on this and then it would bring them to the details, the other dashboard or the other sheet that had more information around Amazon. But now I think there are so many ways you can do that with the navigation and some of the other stuff, with the show hide layout containers. I just don't find myself using it all that much, to tell you the truth. And again, if anyone has any opinion about that, I'd be curious to know. I'd be curious if someone wants to present a good use case for it. Because like I said, I just haven't had too many lately, but I definitely would want to know if there are some out there. I'd want to learn too. But yeah, at the end of the day, the go to sheet action is pretty straightforward. You pick basically a sheet, and whenever someone interacts with that sheet, it automatically can take them to some other dashboard or some other sheet. But that's basically what that is. Okay, so with all of that said, my last thing is that, again, I encourage you so much so to do 3 things. Number 1, if you're going to go to Tableau conference, definitely sign up for the set actions and parameter actions. I'm sure they'll be great. They'll talk about, like I said, a lot of different use cases for both set and parameter actions. Again, I can't stress enough that all of these links, these are some Zen masters. I think the Flurlich twins did one of these. I want to say Ryan Sleeper did one of these. These are going to be way more intuitive when it comes to a lot of the things you can do with set actions and parameter actions. Encourage you all the time to kind of, to use these things. It's kind of how I learned and how we learned. Again, like I said, I know it's like a boring soapbox type of a thing, but this is kind of my point in that there are other user groups that produce really, really great stuff like this, and we learn from it too. So by all means, if you can, check out some of the stuff on our Best of VTUG. If you don't want to check out the Best of VTUG, go to Tableau's YouTube channel and check out all of the user group meetings. Great content being produced by a lot of great people. And even with that, next Tuesday, if you can, the High Country North Carolina Tug, I think they're talking about new features. It's a great opportunity to learn all about Tableau. And really, like I said, this is, it's us helping each other. And that's kind of what the whole point of all this is us really looking for ways to kind of encourage each other, to help each other. So with that, I felt like I've been talking for 45 minutes straight. I apologize in advance. I talk fast. If anyone doesn't realize that, I will work on it, but I want to pause and let any questions, or really, maybe even William, Jeremy, if you guys have anything you want to kind of chime in, anything that I missed, anything anyone wants to know.
Thank you for that, Rashid. I appreciate the presentation today. I think it was great. Yeah, I guess we can open it up to questions. I wanted to give John McClelland a couple of minutes to pitch his session. And then I can pop the survey back up on the screen if anybody wants to still have a chance to respond to that. I didn't see any questions in the Q&A section. There were a couple that came through the chat.
Okay.
Let's circle back on that in just a second. Let me pop the survey back up real quick. If you didn't have a chance to respond to our survey earlier, here's the link, live results. I'm gonna unmute you, John, and give you a chance to, yep, there you go, to tell us a little bit more about the session you're gonna be presenting. So mic is yours.
Great, thanks, Jeremy. And thanks, Rashid. That was great on the actions and the filters, and that was just a nice session there. So yes, for Tableau Conference 2020, I was selected to help talk about the retail and enterprise section of Tableau Unplugged on the 8th of October at 1:30. And this is a kind of a neat forum that they're doing, in that there are two other people that are taking part in this. We're being interviewed by a Tableau user experience designer and Jeff Pettyross. And this was done all virtually. This was pre-recorded, and they're editing it back together. So I honestly can't say exactly what they're going to take from my conversation with Jeff. I've not seen the final cut yet, but it'll be a blended conversation with the director of product analytics from Cisco and the senior BI analyst at United States Cold Storage and myself, where we're talking about how we've used Tableau in the retail and enterprise sector. And where I focused my discussion was around eliminating outdated workflows, mainly around point of sale analytics that we've done here at Apex Tool Group, where we used to employ a third-party group to do point of sale reports to us that would send us basically 145 Excel files every month that were 90 days old by the time we received them and weren't terribly trustworthy, and how we were able to turn that around by using Alteryx and Tableau, so that we're now publishing a single dashboard to people overnight that is up to date with data from the previous day from our customers' POS information. So it's a great example of how you can use Tableau to get rid of antiquated workflows and Excel reports, and actually empower your sales team or your marketing team or whatever your user is. In our example, it was sales and marketing team, but how you can empower them to make better decisions, better serve customers, and really create a competitive advantage for your organization by just using data. So hopefully it gets edited well. Hopefully it's a good representation of our Charlotte Tableau User Group. And I'm excited about it. I think it's a great topic, and I'm passionate about that. So it'll be very enjoyable. Thanks, Jeremy.
Absolutely. Thank you, John. We're proud of you. Glad you're getting the opportunity to be featured this year. Look forward to watching it. Rashid, I'll kick it back to you.
Yeah, no, I'm good. Like I said, unless there's any other questions, anything anyone wants to know. Again, I put the link out there just now in the chat for basically that sample dashboard that I was showing. That's going to have basically all of that sample stuff that I was showing is there. All of the links to those articles for parameter actions and set actions, that's also there. If you want to see the dashboard that I built, the finance one, that is on my Tableau public page. Again, easiest way to get to all this stuff is usergroups.tableau.com/Charlotte. All of our Tableau public pages, if you just click on our pictures on that page, it'll bring you to our Tableau public pages. But all of the links for everything that was presented today can be found in some form or fashion on usergroups.tableau.com/Charlotte. And yeah, Jeremy, unless we want to talk about maybe what you want to do in a future session, I'll let you know. Maybe we can give these guys back some time.
Yeah, it looks like some good notes in the survey. We'll Rashid and William and I'll study this and see if we can craft some content that matches up to the needs here. Again, we really appreciate having everyone. It looks like we had capped off with about 88 attendees today, which is, you know, fantastic for our group. This virtual stuff has really, I think, worked well for us. Glad to have everyone. Thank you for taking the time out of your day and joining us. Unless there's some questions arriving, I think we'll go ahead and wrap this up and send everyone off to the weekend.
Yeah. Tableau conference. If you can't attend live, as always with all years, watch the recordings after the fact. We can't stress enough that that's the one time a year where you're going to get a lot of great content. So it's even if you can't do it that week, trust me, do it afterwards. It's all pre-recorded anyway, or at least the majority of it will be. And anything that was live that day, they'll record and share after the fact. So I'm sure we'll talk about it in our next meeting, you know, afterward. But yeah, I mean, it's a great opportunity to learn from a lot of different people. And again, the beauty, like I said, is that even when you know a lot, the creativity stuff always kind of blows me away. Like, it's just, no matter how much you think you know, there's still so much more to learn.
Yeah, totally agree. All right. Well, with that, enjoy your weekends. You should see some updates from us shortly on next sessions. Look forward to being together again.
Thanks, guys. You guys have a good weekend.